Hello and welcome back. Before I begin, I'd like to give a big thank you to Last Bank Job for becoming my latest subscriber. Thank you so much, I really appreciate it. And now, on with the haul. This is my usual month-end haul from the Book Thing of Baltimore, a wonderful nonprofit that gives out free books on the weekends and accepts donations of unwanted books. And you can find out more about them by going to www.bookthing.org. And onward and upward. First, I picked up Stephen King's Danse Macabre, and you may recall from my previous haul that I had gotten a Stephen King book called Pet Sematary. I was going to give him another chance, and I wound up really liking that. And so I'm going to try discriminately to keep exploring his work, but I'm not going to pick up just anything. I'm going to try to hit the high spots. But this is a nonfiction book he put together in the early 80s, pretty close to when he published Pet Sematary, and this is his survey of horror fiction and horror cinema. And then I got this horrible thing, which I can't believe I even picked it up, but it's called I, a Sailor, and it's written by Morgan Holm. And this is a Swedish novel, I believe, that was published in 1967 with the most salacious possible packaging. And I just love these crazy covers. Honestly, I pick half of these things up just because I love the covers, and someday I'll probably read it, but I don't have extremely high expectations for its literary value. And then I picked up another novel that I had never heard of called The Maze Maker by Michael Ayrton, but it's published by Bard, which is kind of an interesting little imprint. They publish a lot of Latin American fiction, or they did. It's kind of an older imprint. But this is not Latin American. It is the story of, or it's a retelling of the myth of Daedalus, the famous inventor, as opposed to Daedalus the plumber. I don't know. And then I picked up a collection of poems by Paul Verlaine. This includes La Bonne Chanson, Romance sans Parole, and Sagesse. Verlaine was one of the major poets in the Symbolist movement and is also extremely well known for his relationship, or his tumultuous relationship, with Arthur Rimbaud. And don't be like me. I always somehow, for some reason, get him confused with François Villon, who's a completely different poet, who's a medieval troubadour poet, I believe, and unless he had a time machine, therefore had absolutely nothing to do with Rimbaud. But anyway, this is Verlaine. And then I picked up a novel called The Boat by Lothar Gunther Buchheim, and this is apparently the novel on which the film Das Boot was based, which I haven't seen yet, but I do plan to at some point, and I wasn't even aware it was based on a book, but I figured I might as well grab it. Then I got a couple novels by Kingsley Amis, The Green Man, which I believe is his sole foray into horror fiction, and I Want It Now. And let's see, got a few more novels. Two Solitudes by Hugh MacLennan, and Little Company by Eleanor Dark. And then I got The Fall of Hyperion by Dan Simmons. This is the second book in his Hyperion series, and I have not read the first one. And I don't have the first one, which is a little bit of a problem, but because I feel like with science fiction series, those are the kinds of things where you really need to try reading them in order. I don't know though, maybe this would stand alone okay, but I'm going to try to find the first one. And then I got another interesting cover. This is Joy, Expanding Human Awareness by William C. Schutz. And Schutz was a major figure at Esalen, which was perhaps the epicenter of the human potential movement, or the American human potential movement, of the late 1960s that sort of extended into the 70s and is really still with us. Esalen was a center in California where people would go and try to, I guess, raise their consciousness, achieve their fullest human potential. And they did things that would seem kind of outlandish to us today, or that aren't widely practiced, like encounter groups, scream therapy, that kind of thing, but also things that have become really mainstream, like meditation and yoga. And this is this guy's primer on how to achieve joy. And then I got the Penguin Book of New Zealand Verse. Another novel, The Linguist by Sebastian Beaumont. and a novel Measuring the World by Daniel Kelman. I was excited to find this because I really liked Kelman's two more recent novels. This is his first one, Me and Kaminsky and Fame. And this is a dreaded historical novel, but I figured his other two books are so good, I should at least give this one a shot. And then I got Blood Dews, a memoir by Dotson Rader. Dotson Rader was really active in the 1960s, counterculture, student revolt, etc. It's funny because if you're reading a book about the 60s and the person really hates the 60s, he or she will always find some Dotson Rader quotation that's really just off the wall insane and will include it and be like, look, all these people were saying this, that, and the other. Kind of a wild guy. But now he writes for Parade magazine, which I find really kind of hilarious. But this is his memoir. And then I picked up Clues of the Caribbees, Being Certain Criminal Investigations of Henry Poggioli, Ph.D. by T.S. Stribling. This is what appears to be an old classic series of detective stories. I'd actually never heard of these. Let's see, when were they published? This was apparently published in 1929. And I really picked it up because the Dover publisher tends to publish a lot of just really interesting older reissues. I figured it's worth a look. And then I got a couple of classic memoirs. The Flame Trees of Thika by Elspeth Huxley, and 20 Years of Growing by Maurice O'Sullivan. And another science fiction novel, The Patron Saint of Plagues by Barth Anderson. Had never heard of this, but again, it's published by a good imprint, Bantam Spectra, so figured it was worth a try. I know it seems like half the things I just get because they're from a good imprint, and at this point, honestly, that is a lot of the way I discover interesting new books, especially fiction. But, I've done pretty well with that system. Then I got Love's Executioner and Other Tales of Psychotherapy for anyone who's ever been on either side of the couch by Irvin D. Yalom, M.D. I have actually never been on either side of the couch, but this is supposed to be a classic in its field. I tend not to be that much into psychotherapeutic case histories just because they tend to make me feel either voyeuristic or bored or both. But as I said, this is a classic. The one exception to that would probably be Reviving Ophelia, which for some reason my mother had a copy of, and right after it came out, and it was such a big deal, by Mary Pfeiffer. And I don't know if I was even a teenager. I was pretty young, but I sort of pilfered her copy and was flipping through it and found it sort of enlightening. That's where I learned the word sadomasochistic, so thank you, Mary Pfeiffer. And then I got The Fawn and the Woodcutter's Daughter by Barbara Leone Picard. This I had never heard of before, but I was rummaging around in the children's bins because most of the books at the book thing they have on shelves, but the children's are in these bins and it gets a little gross. You have to sift through, but I'm tough, I can handle it. This is just a collection of fairy tales that were published, original fairy tales by this Barbara Leone Picard. Let's see, when was this published? Published in 1964. And then I got The Decline of the Wasp by Peter Schrag. And The Defection of A.J. LeWinter by Robert Littell. I've been curious about Littell because I really have not read that much spy fiction. I'm trying to think, and I'm not sure I've read any spy fiction ever. But it's a gap I'd like to fill in at some point, and he's supposed to be one of the really good authors in the genre. And one of the ones I'm really curious about is The Company, but that's like 700, 800 pages long, so I figured I'd start with this one and move on if I liked it. And then I got The City Jungle by Felix Salten, which unfortunately does not have a nice cover. But I remember I talked about Felix Salten before and how he wrote these children's books about animals that really are kind of odd for children's books. I'm not really sure I'd give them to children, although I guess sometimes when you're a kid, if there's something that is a little old for you or that you don't quite understand, sometimes your brain just kind of skims over it. I don't know. And then another novel, Jeff in Venice, Death in Varanasi by Jeff Dyer. Jeff Dyer is one of these authors I've always just been sort of curious about, and I found this one, so I figured I'd give it a go. And then I got The Summer of the Ubume by Natsuhiko Kyogoku. This is, I had never heard of this before. It appears to be a supernatural, or a Japanese novel of the supernatural, a pretty recent one. It was written in 1994. And I love films like Kwaidan and Onibaba that are sort of the classic Japanese supernatural films, and I figured I would give this a try. It draws on the same tradition. And you may recall in my last haul, I was showing off an AS Buy-It I got, and I got yet another AS Buy-It, The Shadow of the Sun. And I was excited about this. This is the New Oxford Book of 18th Century Verse, edited by Roger Lonsdale. I love 18th century literature, but I have not read nearly enough of it, and so I'm eager for anything that broadens my reading there. Judging by some of the reviews on the back of this, Kingsley Amis, Tom Holland, it sounds like it's a pretty good anthology, and it also sounds like it's a bit of a revisionist one, and I'm not really sure how you do a revisionist anthology of 18th century verse, but I guess I'll find out. And then I got this novel, Specials, by Scott Westerfeld. This is, once again, not the first book in a series. This is the third book in the Uglies series. I'm really not sure about this series at all. I haven't read the first two books, which, once again, may be a problem. But it's supposed to be very good, and it sounds sort of intriguing, but it is a young adult series. And I found, in the young adult books I've picked up lately, I just have not really been able to get into them. I think maybe, am I just an old lady or something? I don't know what the deal is, but they haven't really done much for me. So if anybody out there has read these, if you'd like to leave me a comment and just let me know if they're good, if they're really worth reading, I'd appreciate it. And last but not least, I picked up William Morris, His Life, Work, and Friends by Philip Henderson. William Morris was just a really fascinating English figure in literature, design, art, fiction, and he had a bunch of really interesting friends, so I am curious to read this massive tome about them all. And if you've made it this far, thanks for watching, and I hope you'll join me for my next video.